3D Mark, a software suite owned by UL and created by FutureMark a little over 2 decades ago. It was and still is directly aimed at the 3D gaming industry for the sole purpose of giving you a general idea of your PC's 3D gaming capabilities. In November, the company introduced a feature that honestly should have been there from the beginning, or at least should have appeared in some form about a decade ago when 3D PC gaming really started to become mainstream, at least for me. This feature is estimated gaming performance, and that's what we're talking about today on your boot sequence. So what is estimated gaming performance? Well, before it was added, 3D Mark was mostly used for two things. One, bragging rights. You see it everywhere on YouTube these days, competitions between YouTubers and pro overclockers to push the limits of their hardware and take the number 1, or more commonly these days, between the number 2 and 20 spot on the specific benchmark's leaderboard. The second thing is to test for system stability. You could do all of your fine-tuning for your PC and run a few benchmarks to see if your PC stays stable during these tests. That one, in my opinion, is actually the more useful thing. But now we got estimated gaming performance. UL knows that 3D Mark benchmarks don't really tell you much on their own, and as a company that is based around establishing a benchmark, it's kind of counterintuitive for games. So they did some internal testing and noticed a correlation between their scores and performance in games. What a shocker, right? So by looking at specific graphics scores for specific PCs, you could estimate the frames per second you would get in any games. Or at least right now in 5 games, since UL is starting with 5, but has said that they would add several games in the coming years. So I tried it out. I ran Firestrike Extreme on my PC to give myself a baseline. Looking at the 3D Mark results, it gives me 2 estimates, one at 1080p Ultra and another at 1440p Ultra for each game. There are no 4K estimated gaming performance just yet. The first question to ask is, how does UL benchmark these games? Well, according to the website, when available, they use the canned benchmarks in games. If it wasn't available, then they have their own benchmarking route. Since only 2 of the 5 games have built-in benchmarks, I'm going to use those to compare. After I ran Firestrike Extreme, I got an estimated gaming performance of 45 FPS at 1080p Ultra and 35 FPS at 1440p Ultra for Red Dead Redemption 2. Not a great score, but that's not why we're here. The second question to ask is, what is considered Ultra? Well, the company says that it tested the games at its highest preset quality, which is fine. I can turn them all the way up. But the issue here is the anti-aliasing settings. Did they use TAA, FXAA, MSAA, or a combination of those? And if they used MSAA, did they use it on Reflections 2? And did they use X2, X4, or X8? None of this is disclosed, and it's pretty important since performance tanks the higher you set the MSAA. I mean, I did the testing for this video, so I might as well share the results with you guys. At 1080p, with all of the settings turned up and TAA and FXAA enabled, I got 68 FPS average on Red Dead Redemption 2. These are great post-processing AAs, but they can produce some blur in certain scenes. Adding X2 multi-sample anti-aliasing dropped the FPS down to 59. That's a 14% drop just adding MSAA. Going to X4 drops it further to 52 FPS, and if you're insane enough to go with X8, it tanks to 41.7 FPS average. And that's just the main MSAA. Adding reflection MSAA to the mix will go even further down. It can go all the way down to a screeching low 36 FPS, which means that you can lose up to half your frame rate to MSAA. Ouch! Let me know if you'd like a video which dives deeper into anti-aliasing. I'd love to make one. Anyways, so I tried by 2 by 2 by 4 by 2 by 4 by 4 and so on, and it seems like by 4 MSAA and by 4 MSAA reflections matched their results. So I translated these settings to the GTA 5 benchmark since it has both settings, and wow. Yeah, the 3D Mark estimated gaming performance of both GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2 were on par with the real world. Kinda. Red Dead was accurate in both resolutions, but GTA 5 was only accurate at 1080p, not at 1440p. It was quite off actually. It had a prediction of 60 plus FPS, but I average around 82 FPS instead. I then used Frame Viewer and played a few games of Apex Legends and Fortnite, and those two were also very accurate. The average at 1440p and 1080p once again matched the estimated gaming performance. So it's kind of a slam dunk, right? It got pretty much everything right, except for GTA 5 at 1440p. Well, that's where things break down. I also ran Firestrike, Firestrike Ultra, TimeSpy, and TimeSpy Extreme. The problem? All of them gave me different results for the estimated gaming performance, sometimes with differences of up to 30 FPS. Take a look at this chart for example. When I run TimeSpy, it says I'll get 200 plus FPS in Fortnite. If I run Firestrike, it says 170 plus. Sure, these are high enough frame rates that a user wouldn't really feel the difference in practice, but look at Red Dead Redemption 2, where we get 35 plus and 45 plus between benchmarks. That's a pretty big difference in percentage, but it's also very noticeable in real life while you're playing the game. UL does say that we may see small differences in frame rate estimates from different benchmarks on the same system. For example, the frame rates estimates from a TimeSpy score may not exactly match the estimate from a Firestrike score. I mean, sure, but my issue with this is that it's not a small difference. 30 FPS is pretty big. I'm not sure what caused this discrepancy, but I believe it could be because TimeSpy is a DX12 benchmark, while Firestrike is a DX11 title, and maybe that skews with their whole score and algorithm. But anyways, with the results we have, what do I think of this estimated gaming performance feature? Right now, I think it's useless. It's definitely a gimmick, but I do see a future for it. As time passes and more games are added to the list, UL could compile all of those results and create a really useful database for consumers. The main problem, in my opinion right now, is that they only use the graphics score, so only for GPU-bound tasks. This means that the CPU is left totally out of the equation. These tests do have CPU-bound scores, and adding them to the equation could probably make things even more accurate. Now, sure, almost all of the new games are GPU-bound, but it's not an excuse to ignore the CPU score, or physics score, whatever you want to call it, which could refine this tool. Not everyone needs a high-end CPU and GPU combo, and we already know this, but the possibility of having a tool where you just enter in the parts that you plan to purchase and see the FPS that you could get in specific games is a game changer for PC gaming. It would allow you to tailor your CPU, GPU, and your display's refresh rate accordingly. Now, if you want to test this feature out, it's only accessible by buying the full version of 3D Mark, which, if I recall, is something like $5 Canadian. But like I said, it has very minimal use right now. Anyways guys, this is only my third non-news related video on the channel. You can check here if you want to see the others, but it is something that I want to do a lot more in 2021. This along with some reviews and builds, but that is it for this one. Hopefully you've enjoyed. If you have any questions or feedback about this episode, you can leave them in the comment section down below. As usual, you can click right here to see the latest video right here to subscribe to the channel. Stay frosty my dudes, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Rolling them dices, I love it, I'm fine. Canvas for faces, I'm painting these pictures of mine. Rolling them dices, I love it, I'm fine.